Afternoon session. We've got an interesting panel put together here to talk about making the most of your networking opportunities. My name is Bob Wessels. I'm a subcontract program manager at Lockheed Martin in Denver. And I've got a fairly distinguished panel with me. We'll start off with Laura McGill on the end here. She's Vice President of Engineering at Raytheon Missile Systems. So she's had a long career with Raytheon. Is currently the chief engineer for Air Force for the air product stuff. That's good. Thank you. I appreciate that coming. So she'll give us her insight into networking and the kinds of things that she did in her career so far. I'm not saying it's over yet. It's just so far. That's good. It's good. We have Larry Brassi, and Larry graduated from St. Louis University. He spent his career mostly in structural dynamics on the FA-18 program. And he's currently a Boeing technical fellow, so this is like what I call a whiz at work. He's one of the whiz kids sort of thing. So appreciate Larry giving us his insight. And then finally, but not last, Dr. Basil Hassan. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
Basil Hassan.
Basil Hassan, thank you very much. So he's the senior manager of thermal fluid and aerosciences at Sandia National Labs, and he's been at Sandia National Labs for more than 20 years. In a variety of engineering positions there. And we'd like to hear from him as well as how he networked inside of Sandia National Labs as a quasi-government university, private corporation. Now I think Lockheed's managing them, but the engineering part came out mostly out of the government sort of thing. And so I'll give each person, 5-10 minutes to if you'd like to chat a little bit about how you see networking working, maybe as it's evolved over the period of your career, and then we can open it up for questions. I'm on the panel and I'm sort of moderator at the same time, so I have a question or two I can seed the panel with. Although it'd be much better to seed it with your questions because I already sort of kind of know the answer. But so if you guys will develop some questions for our panelists so we can each chat. And sometimes the format is each person will answer. Other times it's 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 4 sort of thing, just depending on what the question is. So we'll get started. I'll let Laura start off with a little bit of her background and her insight into networking.
Okay, great.
Thank you. And if you'll speak into the microphone, thank you.
Sure, try to make it easy for you guys. So my background is an aerospace engineer and graduated from the University of Washington. And through my career, I started out, kind of an aerodynamicist, did a lot of wind tunnel work early on. And then later kind of moved to roles more, I moved kind of away from the research side and development side into more direct program support. So I was involved in programs where we were developing new aerospace systems, and eventually into missile systems at Raytheon. But all through that time, I'd say networking has been important through both the internal networking I do within my company, but I will say AIAA has probably been the biggest boost to networking for me and other professional societies, and also work I've done with outside in the community with universities and things as well. But I'll just give you one example where, just to show how powerful it can be. So for me, I started out doing wind tunnel work, kind of an aerodynamicist, and I had done that work for a number of years, but I moved away from it when I started going more into, I actually followed the technical fellow route and then became a chief engineer for a product line. But through that, I sort of got away from my old roots of wind tunnel testing, but I continued to, be engaged with the people in that community. I knew them, I'd see them, at conferences like this. Even though I still wasn't doing that work, I was involved in that community through my professional society and also just because of my interests. And I'd actually been out of that work for probably 20 years when I actually got just a quick call from somebody who was working a program, not even at the same plant site that I was, but they knew I had roots in aerodynamics. And they just said, hey, we've got this new contract we're working, and we've got a customer that's requesting that we use this very specific methodology, and we've never heard of it. We don't know anything about it. Do you know? Have you ever heard of it? And I said, well, I don't, but I know some people who might know. So I just sent out a quick email to maybe 6 or 7 people that I was, had always been in touch with who do that kind of work. And within 15 minutes, I got back 3 responses that said, here's the methodology, here's a paper that was published about it, here's what we like about it, here's what we don't like about it, pros and cons. And if you have any questions, let me know. And it turned out that work was unpublished work that NASA had been doing. It was unpublished, but they had tried it out in some of their facilities. It was totally unobtainable anywhere else unless you had a connection to it. And that's like instant gold, you know, and that's just one example. Those things come up over and again through your careers, or you know people, or you have a chance to make a connection with something, or you know, find out about something that you wouldn't have known of otherwise. And that's just one example. I'll let the others talk. There's many others, but there's just no. It's like a miracle. The power of networking is just amazing.
Okay, thank you, Laura.
Yeah, let's see. Start off with an interesting, at least for, can you hear me? All right. Hello? Okay. All right. Feel like Phil.
Inside joke.
So, how many are still students in the room? Everyone. Okay. So it's good to know your audience. So, I mean, when I was a student, my first degree was from St. Louis University, and as an undergraduate, and aerospace, and when I was a junior, I got hired by General Electric to work on the B1 program. So do the math, I've probably been working in the industry about 4 or 5 years now. But anyway, before I graduated, Jimmy Carter had canceled the B1 program, so General Electric came back and said, well, we're sorry, we don't have a position for you anymore. So when I graduated, the next best offer was from McDonnell Douglas, who is now part of the Boeing company, and it happened to be in my backyard anyway, because I'm from St. Louis area. So, but the reason I bring that up is two things. You know, there's a lot of things during your career that are beyond your control, and be open to different options. When a door closes, another one always opens. You know, it's definitely true, and that goes along with, you know, mentoring. You know, you'll have different mentors throughout your career, and you know, when you walk through the door at a company in your first job, you are no longer, you know, a student. You're a professional. You're a colleague. You know, and being connected with AIAA, you guys are all AIAA members. I mean, that is huge, and it doesn't have to be AIAA, although it's a good organization. Any technical society, you know, that networking through the industry, because you'll be working in your company, and that other network, that other insight of how do other companies do things is always very, very good. And when you're walking in from universities, the companies that hire you are looking for that diversity too. Is, well, what are they being teaching you in schools and things like that, and you have a different perspective. So the networks is an ongoing thing. You don't have to have a mentor relationship for life. It could be, you know, multiple different, you know, and when it ceases to be beneficial for either the mentee or the mentor, then it's okay to say, okay, I'll try someone else. It's all right to have more than one. You know, you could have somebody that's part of your direct connection with what you're doing on the job, and if somebody that's outside of that has a different perspective can also help.
So let's see. I'll start off by telling you a little bit about myself and a couple of stories that sort of relate to networking that I think have helped me in my career. So I got my bachelor's, master's, and PhD in aerospace engineering from North Carolina State, and my graduate work was funded by NASA Langley Research Center in Hampton, Virginia. So I spent about 5 summers up there working on my research. I had an undergraduate internship too. And then, you know, when I got out in the early 90s, when I got into graduate school, aerospace was booming, and I worked in the hypersonics area. I did computational fluid dynamics, and some of you may have heard about this thing called the National Aerospace Plane, which then President Ronald Reagan announced was going to fly from Washington to Tokyo in 2 hours, and everyone was hyped up about it. And by the time I got out of graduate school, the Berlin Wall fell, the Cold War was over, aerospace companies were We're not hiring. Organizations within the government were doing very little hiring, and the prospects of getting out weren't very good. But ultimately, I got a postdoc position at Sandia National Labs, where I've been since then. You know, when I was in graduate school, and in undergrad, I was a student member of AIAA since I was a freshman, and I went to all the section meetings. And when I was in graduate school, I had the opportunity to publish a paper on my graduate work, my master's work, to present at a conference. So I wrote a extended abstract and submitted it to the conference that was going to be held in the summer in Hawaii, which everyone wanted to go to. And the person who was the general chair of the conference was a colleague of ours named David Throckmorton, who's a former member of the board and he was my branch chief at NASA. And I get this letter from AIAA. I'm like, okay, my paper got accepted and I'm going to Hawaii, and it says your paper was not accepted. And I'm like, what? And it turns out a lot of people wanted to go to Hawaii. There was only a certain amount of space, but and I joke around with this fellow Dave because that could have been something that turned me off, right? I got rejected. But I ended up submitting it to another conference and got it published and things like that. And when I got out of graduate school, this fellow, David Throckmorton, knew I wasn't going to go to NASA. I was going to go to Sandia, and he calls me up and he says, look, he says, one of the things that you should do is stay very active in this professional society. And he was telling me all the things that we're going to tell you today about how the contacts and the networking can be important. And one of the first recommendations he made to me, he says, when you get out to Sandia, go talk to your boss and see if you can join a technical committee. And the technical committee that was sort of most relevant to the work I was doing is the one called the Thermophysics Technical Committee. They do aerodynamic heating and aerothermodynamics and things like that. And so I applied and got on the technical committee. And lo and behold, the one technical committee I applied for was the one that this fellow was the chair of. And so this time he didn't reject me, which was good. But I think that one decision, like I think Laura mentioned earlier, was probably the one thing that I have done that has probably had the widest impact in my career and my life. And if I look at all the contacts that I have in my Outlook contacts, I would say 75 to 80% of them are through people I have met within AIAA or the conferences or through the professional network. And I think one of the things that I've been active, like Larry and Laura have been able to serve on AIAA's board of directors, and started out as a technical committee member and became vice president of technical activities actually after Laura. And you have to find value, right? We're talking, if you went to Jim Albaugh's talk yesterday, we're talking about how to make the society more relevant. And relevancy is sort of in the eye of the beholder, right? You're going to put some time into something that you're going to get something out and help you. And the networking piece isn't necessarily something that you're going to reap benefits from immediately, right? But I can give you an example of a person that I met on a committee while I was in an AIAA committee, and 5 years later, him calling me up and remembering a conversation we had about some work that we had did. And lo and behold, he was sending us several $100,000 a year at Sandia to do some work. Okay, and so that's an example of an external contact that I made through a committee, and we built a relationship over the years, and he said, hey, I think this is something that you guys can help us with. And that lasted for a long time, several years. We had funding that come to Sandia. So that was sort of a tangible financial benefit that my organization got because I had made contacts with people. Another example, which I think will be important to you all as you begin your careers, is sort of an internal to the job. So I spent probably the first 16 years of my career at Sandia National Labs, essentially in an engineering organization. And while I had different jobs within there, it was essentially working with the same group of people. Well, at one point I made the decision to go make a little bit of a career change at Sandia and work in more of a systems organization where we were actually going off and flight testing hypersonic vehicles and rockets and experimental payloads and things like that. And I remember talking to the manager, the manager of the department who had just vacated, and he was sitting there telling me how I needed to hire 3 or 4 people to meet all the deliverables and things that we had to do. And I get in the job, and within 4 months, our funding turned over completely. I was in the position of where I had more money than people, and now I had more people than money. And so one of the things I had to do was, it was my responsibility as the manager to keep those folks gainfully employed. And so one of the things that I had to do was actually go around and exercise the contacts I had in the laboratories at Sandia, which is an organization of 10,000 people. And knowing the people I had worked with and knowing the skill set of the organization I had, I was able to actually matrix almost half of my department out to get temporary work for them to do, which was complementary to the skills they had, until the funding situation improved. And I remember sort of feeling a little nervous about it to begin with, but then I realized, well, let's see, I know this guy, and we work together on a project, and the organization he has might have the need for an aerospace engineer, or might have a need for a flight dynamicist, and things like that. And so it was sort of through those contacts that I was able to go through and find meaningful work for my employees for the next 6 months to a year or so. And it sort of amazed me at the end, is like, wow, I didn't realize that I knew that many people. And there were a lot of people I contacted who I didn't find any work from, but at the same time they said, hey, well, if something comes up later, we might be calling you. And so those are sort of two examples of where I think the people I've met and the network I've built has led to sort of reaping some benefits in the future. They weren't immediately, but if I had not done those things, it wouldn't have happened. Sorry, that was a little long-winded, but
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you, Basil. So I've got a sort of a parallel story. My name is Bob Wessels. I work at Lockheed Martin in Denver, and I've been in Denver in my entire career, more than 35 years now. So in 1993, we won a program area. I'm going to call it Program A, and I started off in the program as a subcontracts person, running a subcontract. I graduated into kind of an integrated product team lead, where I had subcontracts people working for me in engineering and test engineers and quality, and just kind of the broad breadth of about 20 or 25 people. And I worked on that program for almost 10 years in a variety of assignments. My last assignment was in future plans, where we were deciding what's the next generation of the program going to look like in concert with the customer. So that ended in 2004, and between 2004 and this fall, I've had about 6 different program assignments that are outside of that program area. So I got called in September by a previous manager that I'd worked with, and he said, hey, we need some surge support, and I said, you got any time? I said, I got, everybody has 10% bandwidth. So I said, I'll be willing to come over and support you 10%. So I got over into the program. This is Program B now, and they said, first thing they said is, we need you to work here full time, right? So what are you doing for your day job? So you do your day job at night, sort of thing. And the story goes that we were in the midst of a proposal effort, and they needed some information that I knew was in Program A, but I hadn't worked there in 10 years. Okay, but I went back over to the program area, and I said, in a few short conversations, visiting people in their office as opposed to sending them an email. I'm more of an office kind of person as opposed to email. And I got the cost information we needed to put in our proposal in about 2 days. And these people, they went back and looked in their records and researched it. And without that contact, it would have been absolutely impossible to go, fulfill my part of the assigned task that I got. And the point of that is the 10 years that I'd spent in the Program A, I didn't realize I was doing networking at the time, right? I didn't realize there was something in the future that was going to come to that. And I think it's very interesting. We all spend, a tremendous part of our careers getting smart technically, whether it's, computational fluid dynamics. I'm an electrical engineer in radar and comm and RF and microwave. So I spent a lot of time going to conferences in my early part of my career about how do we do microwave engineering and circuit design and that sort of thing. And we spent a tremendous amount of our careers doing that. But at the same time, I would argue that at some point in your career, the networking part of your career is almost more important than your technical skills, because we all work in a technical company. They assume when you're coming in the front door, you can do something. You can either be a stress analyst, you can be a computational fluid dynamicist, you can be a electrical engineer and radar, whatever it is. And so you get a little bit of a free pass there. And so all of us are comfortable doing that because, we went to grade school, high school, college, maybe master's and PhD degrees. So we're focused entirely on making sure that we know the latest and greatest piece of technical data that's in our fields. But I would subscribe to you at some point in your career, your network is more important to you than your technical background, because your job 5 years from now hasn't even been designed yet. The job's not even there. It's not. But when you get 5 years out, you'll be able to do that job because you've got some level of technical skills already in your toolkit, and you'll be able to adapt to the new job requirements of this thing that's not even created yet. So it's important that you also, at the same time, you work on your technical skills. And I'm not telling you don't go to AIAA conferences. I'm not telling you, don't go get a master's or a PhD, et cetera. But I'm telling you that there's an equally important part of your career that is, I'll call it buzzword into networking. And it's not going to the local social. It can be a small part of going to the local social, but that's not really that's not in itself a complete, has all the aspects of networking. It's a small part of it. Yeah, you go have a drink with somebody, you go find out what they're doing, you come to the conference, that's all good. But the networking part of your job occurs every day, in people that you meet and impressions that you make on other people in terms of your drive and your intuition, your follow through. That's all part of networking, even though you don't recognize it as such, sort of thing. So my guidance to you would be not to de-emphasize the technical part of your job, particularly early in your career, because all of us, I think, early in our career, we got some level of what I call 1 inch deep, or a mile deep and an inch wide in something, whether it's computational fluid dynamics or stress or whatever it is. But then later in your career, you'll find that the networking part of your repertoire, of your toolkit, is equally important, perhaps even more important than whether you understand the latest computational fluid dynamics program that's currently on the market. So I would say to each one of you, as you move through your career, to just remember that the networking part of it can be equally as important as I'm going to call it your technical skills, where you're kind of comfortable. Most people are not, natural. They don't just naturally network. I mean, it's not a normal human kind of connection for most people. But to be technically astute in that is sort of a natural engineering attribute that you have. So I would tell you to work on sort of the thing that you're not, I'll say as good at, because the technical part of that seems to come easier to most of us, especially if it's in something that you really like. Like I really like radar, so I'm a radar kind of guy, right? So that stuff comes very easily to me. I'm intuitive when it comes to RF and communications and radar. So the things that you're intuitive to, you shouldn't spend a lot of time to that because you naturally absorb that. The networking part of it, in terms of who you know in your company, and do you need a stretch assignment and something else you've never done before, that stuff's all in the uncomfortable zone. So we collectively don't tend to gravitate towards those kinds of assignments and that. Okay, so I think that's the end of I'm gonna call it our prepared remarks. Probably more importantly is to get what's on your mind out there in terms of things that you would sense is a need for networking in terms of definition, how to do it. Is it mechanics? Is it what aspect is important? So I'll just turn it over to the broad audience. Does anybody have any questions to the panel? Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so I guess one way I think I'd better connect with
Let me get since we're taping this, let me get a microphone to make sure you can repeat. I don't have to repeat the question. Test.
Yeah, okay, so I think one aspect I guess one characteristic for me to better connect with professionals would be to understand kind of like their journey and their process and how they ended up in the positions they are today. So I guess this is going to be a general question for the whole panel. Why did you all get interested in engineering, and why not specifically aerospace? Because like you, Bob, you're not, I guess your background wouldn't be in aerospace, more on the electrical side, but I guess in a general sense, why engineering? And like how can people like me or people like others like kind of use that passion to inspire more people to go into the field?
Yeah, so I can tell you that when I was a kid, I was on the tail end of the Apollo missions that went to the moon, and that just really fascinated me. And NASA was sending the Voyager probes to Saturn and Jupiter, and a lot of these planetary probes. And I remember my dad is a professor in aerospace engineering, so he maybe coerced me a little bit, but I used to tag along with him as a kid to some of the AIAA student section meetings at NC State when someone would be coming to talk about the space shuttle or going to the moon or different things, and that just really got me interested in it. So I sort of knew that that I wanted to do something with planes or spacecraft or rockets or whatever. Now, when I got into school, I sort of decided when I was taking my classes that aerodynamics and fluid dynamics and heat transfer were a little more interesting to me than structural dynamics and materials and those things. So that's where I sort of made my specialization decision about what I wanted to get into. And I think one of the things that helped me from an AIAA standpoint is, you know, we would get speakers to come in at the student section meetings talking about various different aspects of the work they do, whether they came from NASA or a company like Lockheed or Boeing or whatever at the time would talk to us about the work. They would talk to us about specifics of their technical work. They talked to us about different programs they worked, and those are the things that really got me excited, because I was like, yeah, I want to do that, and I want to do that. Well, maybe I don't want to do that one, but those were the opportunities for me to see what other people were doing, right? Because I had never been to a conference. I mean, how many of you all are undergraduate versus graduate? Right. I mean, my first opportunity to participate in a conference was when I had completed the second year of my master's. Right. So that was the first opportunity to come and experience something like this. And so, I think even at an early age, the attending just an AIAA local section meeting got me excited.
I'll say for me it was similar. I'll say same age as Basil, just about. So it was all the Apollo stuff. But what I really gravitated to was I wanted to be involved in stuff that nobody had ever done before. You know, all this stuff with space and technology and aircraft was. It seemed to me that that's where things were being done on the leading edge of technology. And that to me was kind of the exciting part, is actually not being sure if you can pull it off. And I have that same excitement today. I love what we do. You know, some of the stuff we're working on, I'm not actually sure we're going to be able to do it, but I sure want to be there if we do, and to be able to try and do it. And I'll give you one example too. We have a program with Raytheon where we bring in teachers who teach math and science. They come in to work with us so that they can learn what we actually do. So when a kid asks them, so, well, why do I care about this stuff? You know, this math and science I'm learning. They can say, well, you know, they can give an example that they worked on. And at the end of just a few weeks they spend with us, like maybe 9 or 10 weeks, they have a chance to go tell us what the experience meant to them. And the thing I hear more and more is they go, you guys love what you do. I mean, that's the main thing they take away, is how much these scientists and engineers come into work excited about what we're doing every day, and we enjoy it, and we love talking about it, and we try to get other people excited about it, because it is fun every day. I mean, I'm so glad however it happened, that I stumbled into it. You know, this is definitely where I want to be.
Yeah, we're all about the same age, I guess. So the space race was huge. And in my background, my dad was involved in aviation. He worked for the Army Aviation Systems Command, and we lived close to the Scott Air Force Base. So I remember going to the air shows with him and things like that. And I was good in science and math, as you probably are too. I mean, has anybody second guessed whether they should be an engineering student or not?
Way too late for that,
Yeah.
right?
Okay. I mean, and it's hard. I mean, even when you understand it, just keeping up with all the courses, it takes a lot of work, And I look back on my career, I'm 30 plus years, and I can still remember exactly the first day walking through the door, you know, and okay, what am I prepared for? I told you the story about not getting my first job before I graduated. I could have been a propulsion guy. I turned into a structural dynamics, and I didn't know that 35 years later I would still be a structural dynamicist. But, you know, and I've gotten a chance as a technical fellow to work on every single program that Boeing does now, both commercial side and where I'm at in defense and space and things like that. So about 5 years ago, I got to work on the B-1, a life extension, you know, fatigue program. We took 2 old airplanes out of the boneyard and refurbished them and started doing some, you know, fatigue cycling on it to extend the life of it. So it is. I mean, you know, time flies when you're having fun. No doubt about it. And you look back on your career as an undergraduate and a graduate, it was hard, but it probably went past pretty quickly. Yes or no? What do you think? Yeah? Are you looking forward to getting into industry? Yeah? Okay. All right. So, you know, as an undergraduate, you get a pretty broad range of subjects. You know, what are you most interested in? It was where's the opportunities? You know, and people change sometimes. You know, maybe you start in aerodynamics, or you start into structures and you change and you get different opportunities, or you don't stay in a company 35 years. A lot of people don't do that anymore. Just to get back to some networking, Raytheon, Boeing works with Raytheon on plenty of programs. One, missile defense, I got to support that. And, you know, I had some things that they had to work through that was structural dynamics related. Lockheed, you know, the long-range strike and some other programs and things like that. F-22, we worked with them, you know. Basil, I think mostly it's through AIAA connections. So we started off, I think when we met, we were deputy directors technical.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's a small society. I mean, aerospace is you know, it's big, but, you know, going through, you know, these conferences and networks, as everybody's described, you get to know people and you keep, you know, you work with them, you go to conferences with them, you do research programs, whatever.
So one of the things I wanted to add was sort of what can you expect when you get out of school, and how can AIAA sort of be a part of that, part of your life or part of your career. So the scenario is you're going to graduate, you're going to get a job, you're going to move somewhere around the country, and if you continue to be an AIAA member, you'll transfer from a student to a professional member, and you will be assigned to a section. Okay, I think there's something like 70 sections. 59, okay. I think we've gotten rid of a few, but 59 sections around the country. And you will be assigned to that section. Now, each section operates a little bit differently, but typically they have like a monthly meeting where they'll bring in a speaker, or they'll have some activity where they have tours, like a plant tour at a Lockheed or a NASA facility or something like that. But they'll do things. And all the people within the local section are just members like you. They volunteer their time to make the Institute great, and they do a lot of things like doing STEM activities where they may support design competitions for high schools or middle schools, and there's a lot of volunteer time. Alternately, at the national level, you could get involved with the technical committee or the young professionals committee or something like that, where if there's maybe a connection with your job, your employer may actually send you to present papers or send you to be involved in a committee. And the way that you get involved is basically through volunteering your time. And that's where you meet people. So even if it's something as simple as volunteering to review an abstract for a conference paper, or something as simple as volunteering to be a session chair in one of the sessions that you come to, or volunteering to put on a, going to talk at a school about rockets or airplanes or something like that, that's something that will help you meet other people, you'll get involved, and as people see that you get involved in things and that you do a really good job in those things, then they're going to ask you to do other things, right? And AIAA sort of has a leadership hierarchy of members like us who, I think mine and Laura's and probably Larry's is all very similar in that we started out as a member on a technical committee. We helped support the conferences. We helped review abstracts. We became session chairs. I think when I first met Laura, we were actually both the technical chairs for the particular conferences that we were running. She was ground test, I was thermophysics. We became technical committee chairs. We became deputy directors. We became elected directors of the board and things like that. And that was something that happened over a period of like 15 to 20 years, right? It's not something that happened overnight, but I think the fact that we got involved, we volunteered our time, and our organizations found that valuable because we were coming to the conferences, we were presenting, we were learning things, we were meeting people, and that's how you get in there. And I think one of the tricks that I've sort of found, which I've used with my management, is that sometimes they won't send you to a conference unless you're presenting a paper. But if you get on a technical committee or helping to organize the conference, maybe one time you don't have a paper, but they'll still send you because you've sort of made a commitment to do that, and they'll make the resources available. So that's something that, unless somebody sort of helps you go down that path, you might not know to do those things. So we'll probably talk a little bit about mentorship later, but when you get to wherever you go, find somebody who isn't active in a society that's applicable to the work you do. It may be ASME, it may not be AIAA. We hope it's AIAA. But find somebody who can sort of help you with those decisions, including us, all the professional members that you see at the conferences. I'm always happy when somebody sends me an email and say, hey, someone told me you might be a good person to talk to about technical committees. Can I give you a call one afternoon and chat about it? So it's very easy today to, and I talk about this with my kids, right, to do communication over texting and email and things like that, but making that personal connection is going to be one of the first things that you need to do, and it'll go a long way.
Okay, thank you, Basil. We have time for probably one more question, I would say. Yes?
Okay, my question is.
I think it's on.
It's on? Okay, sorry. So my question is, I'm from Italy. I study in Italy. I live in Italy. This is my probably only occasion I have to come attend a meeting in the U.S. I had the opportunity to talk to some professional, and they all suggested me to have my network in the U.S. So my question is, how can somebody from Italy or Europe, or I guess around the world, and who does not have the opportunity to come to the US very often, so I think I cannot participate in AIAA activities, how can I build my network in the US?
So actually, one of the committees I've chaired for AIAA was the Standards Committee, and we've actually had international members who were never actually able to actually come to a meeting physically, but they could still be involved with us to review standards, to participate in some of the activities of the committee. There's different kinds of things AIAA. It's a huge organization, and when you think of all the things we do, student activities, professional activities, standards, we write white papers, we do all kinds of things. I bet you there's a way to get involved that doesn't require you to actually physically, come to some things. And standards was one example where it actually works out really well.
And from a personal standpoint, you can always do virtual meetings, whether it's electronic, email, call on the phone, and once you've established, a contact in the backgrounds and everything, you don't necessarily have to do it face to face. It's nice, but I mean, in today's world, it's not essential.
In fact, a lot of the work of AIAA doesn't happen at the meetings. There's definitely a lot of meetings. Look at the list. There's a lot of meetings. But a lot of the work happens in between, and it's all by telephone and email and, e-rooms and all kinds of things.
Yeah, a couple of other things. So even if you're in Italy, right, you would be a member of Region 7, which is the international region. And AIAA has some memorandums of understanding with some societies that are in other countries. I don't know if there's one in Italy, but certainly there are others in Europe, European versions of AIAA that we have connections with. Now, sometimes we actually take some of our conferences internationally. Like there's a hypersonics conference that every 18 months occurs outside the US. There's an aeroacoustics conference that every third year is usually in Europe because we are, I think we are affiliated with AAAS, which is a French aerospace organization. So, and I think as Larry said, I mean, there's opportunities to do things virtually, and I think those opportunities, we as an institute need to be better at them, but I think we're trying to make those more available because we realize that not everybody can travel, right? That probably 10% or 15% of the membership actually physically come to AIAA conferences, right? And there's another 85 to 90% of our members who are still members of the institute, but they participate in different ways, even if it's at a local level.
Okay, I do see there's a misprint in the book, and this session actually goes for an hour and 45 minutes if we do have additional questions. So let's generate another couple of questions of your interest. Karen?
Can you share how networking impacted your career, your working career? Did it provide you opportunities for advancement and those stories?
Well, definitely. So that one example I gave at the beginning where I was able to help our company solve a problem, I mean, that is invaluable, and things like that get noticed. I'll say to me, it's kind of gone through a cycle. When I was first, early in my career, I was doing the kinds of work, like I talked about wind tunnel flight testing and things like that, where the work I was doing with AIAA was very closely tied to it. I was doing wind tunnel work, and I was on the ground testing committee. And then there was a time where my career kind of diverged from the stuff I was doing with AIAA, but I always kept that AIAA connection. In fact, I got involved in a little bit of program management and some things like that where AIAA kind of helped me keep my technical fix while I was doing some, kind of trying out some IPT lead roles and management kind of roles. And for a while there, there wasn't really a lot of direct connection, but I continued to be involved in AIAA because I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the engagement with my colleagues, and I thought the work I was doing was important. Things like standards, working on a standard that was going to be an industry standard, I felt like that had more effect than maybe the work I was even doing in my office at home, at work. And so for a while there, I even actually had to argue to go get funding to go to conferences and to attend committee meetings because my bosses kind of correctly recognized, well, it's not really very closely tied. And then it kind of came full circle when I kind of got up to kind of another level in my career where I was a chief engineer of a program. And the company actually started to recognize, wow, some of these contacts I've made through AIAA on my own, not because they were my customer or because there's somebody in industry that it's a little, it's not artificial, but it's a little bit more authentic when it's somebody you just met through work that you cared about and had a common interest in. And my company actually really recognized that was invaluable too. The exposure and the connections I've made on my own outside of that company, I've able to bring back in, and it's brought in contracts. It's brought in ties to work that we wouldn't have done otherwise. Right? I'll give you one example that just happened the last couple nights. An AIAA colleague that I worked with on a project called me up because there's a study that he's an academic. They've been contracted to do a study for a congressional committee, and he's looking for a point of contact from my company who would help influence that. Now, of course I want to do that because I want to make sure that congressional committee gets the right information to make smart decisions. But being able to influence it in a way that makes sense from the work that my company is doing, that's gold. I mean, and that's a connection that only happens through AIAA, and it is valued by your organizations.
So I'll say, in my 23 years at Sandia, I've had the opportunity to apply for several jobs, management-related jobs. One was the first management job I got, and then another one was more recently where I got promoted to the next level. But in each of those cases, when I was going through the interview process and they were sort of asking me about, how credible am I as a candidate, on a lot of occasions I used AIAA as an examples of why I thought I would be a good person for that job. A couple of them have been R&D focused, and AIAA is sort of helps promote research and development and the communication of that information. And it was the fact that I was able to say that I have held leadership positions within AIAA. I was involved in organizing conferences, that I had met people and brought money into the laboratories, and being able to use those examples, and I think that created a differentiator for me and other candidates who had not done that stuff, because they saw that. And even when I was applying for a job that only had a very small aerospace piece but was a broader one, the fact that I had actually been able to make those external contacts and be able to create programs and to bring money in externally because of those was an advantage to me, because they knew that those were going to be the kind of things that were going to be important for those management positions to have. So those were it was really important, and I can even see that when I have interviewed people for jobs, the ones that stand out more to me are the ones who have made those external connections.
Yeah, I think it's good to have internal mentoring, so the company you're working for, your immediate supervisor is probably not a good mentoring relationship, because it's a slightly different with goals and objectives and things like that. Look for somebody, it could be within your same department that you're working in, but maybe somebody that you're not working directly for, or is more of a senior member or something like that. They give you that look of what kind of opportunities are in that field right now, for that company. And then again, go back to the industry networks, and AIAA is a great organization to get into that and to share a story. My first master's program was from the University of Missouri Science and Technology, which used to be Rolla. You may have heard of it. And I wrote a paper off of my master's thesis, and it turned into excuse me, it turned into a foundational paper and finding on nonlinear flutter, which I didn't know it at the time, but it's still. And I can remember standing up there as a fairly young student professional, because I was still working full time, and there were icons in the audience, and Holt Ashley was one, and Earl Dow from Duke. Holt has passed away, but and now they're colleagues. Like I said, as soon as you become a professional, even a mentoring relationship, your colleagues, and it's a two-way interaction. The mentoring-mentee relationship should be a give and take. The mentor is looking for you to come in with different perspectives. Again, coming straight out of school, you're fresh, you've got new ideas, you've got new ways of thinking. Those are important to share. So don't be bashful with any kind of relationships that you generate, and having internal to your company and external through the industry is very, very important from a mentoring and networking.
I'd also like to mention another aspect, especially when you're early careers, you may not have a chance to travel to conferences and things, but especially when you're new, in most organizations, there's projects that have to get done. And especially when I was early, and I was kind of like the junior member of one group, I was like the youngest. And so whenever the call would come down from the company saying, hey, we're starting up this team to go solve this problem, I usually got volunteered for stuff. And I even asked, why is that? Well, you're the most junior person in the department, so you're the one we're going to send out. And one of them was, I was on a pretty big program, but I got sent to do this team, because we had this big problem, because it took us forever to get a purchase order out to a supplier once we won a contract. So this team was supposed to go solve that problem. Now I'm an engineer. Do I really care what's involved to get a purchase order out to a supplier? Not really, but I got volunteered to this team, and to me it was like eye-opening, because I learned a whole bunch of stuff about how our company works that I wouldn't have otherwise, that turned out to be invaluable later for when I was a program manager or in other roles. Even as a chief engineer, sometimes stuff like that comes in really handy. And I learned that. I met people in those other organizations, and I learned stuff about how it works, that I could go get stuff done. If something got hung up, I was one who knew how to go fix that problem, because I was aware of something just because I happened to be on this team. So, the networking can come from anywhere. Don't don't shy away from those opportunities to go do something that's totally different than your normal job, because you'll learn stuff and have experiences and meet people that you wouldn't otherwise, and some of them can just really turn out to be really useful to you, and they all do help your career.
Yeah, so let me sort of add to that. I had a little bit of the same experience at Lockheed Martin when I started off. You know, if you seek out people that are just like you, let's say you're a stress engineer and you work in a department of 10 stress engineers, you can go get a stress engineer that's senior to you to be your mentor. That's perfectly acceptable if that meets your thing. But I would argue that you might be more valuable going and getting a manufacturing senior manager to be your mentor, or a quality senior manager, because they bring us a totally different perspective to it, and you're not going to be a design engineer in that department for your entire career. So it's important for you to judge the value of getting mentors and networks that are outside of your, you know, what I call your soda straw of experiences. The second thing I would tell you is when I first got to Lockheed, you know, I was, 22 years old, and I had done some intern work there for 6 different quarters, and so I kind of knew, the who's who in the pew and who was the vice president of this and the vice president of that. So over the period of time when I was interning and co-oping there, I went and talked to quite a few vice presidents, and I would say, well, tell me a little bit about your career and how you got to be vice president of engineering or vice president of quality. And I was, totally fascinated, the different paths that these people took. And the conclusion I drew from that was, in my quest to go from, everybody wants to be vice president, I think, when they come into the company, at some level. In my quest to do that, I quickly came to the conclusion that whatever path these vice presidents had gone through was not going to be an acceptable or an available path for me, because that was their time on their program with their forcing functions and those funding programs and the life of the program and the phase of the program. So your next levels of career steps in your company don't even exist yet. So it was eye-opening to see the different paths that people had taken. They used to call it, climbing a ladder. Now I would argue it's more like a jungle gym thing, where you got to kind of go up a level or two and go sideways around it, a little bit of a Rubik's Cube thing or something. But to try to emulate some mentor that you have up in the company, the likelihood of you following that same person's path is pretty unlikely. But the most important point to remember is that your network does allow you to, I'll say, climb around in this jungle gym and to try to attain the sort of what I call top of the mountain or king of the hill or whatever you call it, sort of thing. Okay, well, we have time for some more questions.
So you mentioned how volunteering your time is a great way to make additional contacts, and I would agree with you on that. But you also mentioned all the committees, and as a new member, how do you get on a committee? Who do you contact? Is it on the website? Do I have to talk to somebody else and hope to get to one of the managers through some set of connections, or is it freely available to all members?
Let me start, I guess. When first opportunity probably would be on a technical committee, and there are, for any discipline in aerospace engineering, there is a technical committee associated with that through AIAA. And yeah, you can look on the AIAA website and apply. They do have young professional members that the technical committees that are always looking for new folks coming in those opportunities. You do need to be able to interact with that technical committee, and that goes back to internally having that discussion with your immediate supervisor and or your mentor to say, hey, I'd like to get involved with AIAA at this level. It might include some travel, some external hours and things like that. And show them why that's good for you personally, and it's also why it's good for your company as far as, growing, in the industry from a leadership standpoint, and also getting a better understanding of what your technical excellent, whether it's structure, aerodynamics, whatever it is,
So, as Larry said, there's a place on the website. So nominations for technical committees open up typically on August 1st, and they're open up through November 1st for terms starting on May 1st. Okay, so it's about an 8-month sort of turnaround, and so what happens is you will go on there's about a 1-page application you fill out with mostly resume type material. There will be questions asking you what are your areas of expertise, what are the areas you are interested in. There's a write-up typically about each one of the technical committees. There's about 70 of them, and a lot of them have a web page that talks about some of the activities they do. And one of the questions on there is, what might you bring? What might you bring to our committee? How might you help us? And what I normally tell people is part of I tell them is, you're there to extend your professional network. You're there to contribute to the activities of the committee. And so most of these committees meet in conjunction with the conferences. So I would say the vast majority of technical committees meet twice a year. Some maybe only one, some have virtual meetings. You will, like Larry said, you will have to get support from your organization that says, yeah, we'll allow you to participate. Now, I remember when I was a subcommittee chair on the committee I was on, we had a guy from NASA who had applied to be on the committee, and he was assigned to my subcommittee. And once he got on the committee, he got a new boss, and the boss said, well, I'm only going to send you if you have a paper. You can't go to the committee meetings unless you're going to present a paper. And he was really bummed about it, and he says, I think I need to get off the committee because I can't come. And what I told him was, I said, look, I realize you have that constraint, but as Laura mentioned earlier, a lot of the work we do is outside the committee meetings. And so I think it was a subcommittee that wrote the year in review article that shows up in the December issue, and he only made it, during his 3-year term, he only made it to 2 technical committee meetings. But he was probably one of the most active guys on the committee because he was helping us put that article together. He was reaching out to people and things like that, and all that stuff was done outside the committee meetings. So one of the things that I'll encourage you to do here this week is probably starting tonight, a lot of the technical committees are meeting. Okay, and if you look at inside the program, that list of all the committee meetings is, if you get a chance, go to the website and look at the ones. If you're interested in structural dynamics or if you're interested in fluid dynamics, those TCs are meeting this week, and maybe you can drop by, introduce yourself to the chair, and say, hey, I'm going to be graduating in the next 6 months or a year, and I don't know where I'm going to be working, but I think I might like to get involved in a technical committee. Can you tell me more about it? And just sort of make that connection.
And if you do that, get involved in the activities. Don't just go and attend. Get involved. There's they're putting on conferences. They're reviewing papers. They're having activities with schools. They're writing white papers for Congress. They're making public policy recommendations. There's lots of ways to get involved, and that's actually where you really get the network. Is just going to a meeting and sitting there isn't going to get you a network. It's getting involved in working. And I'll say one other thing too that you can get from involvement in these kinds of activities that you can't get in your normal job, and that is you have to lead through influence. If you're in a volunteer organization and you want to get things done, you have to learn to get people motivated so that they want to do it, because that's the only way it works with volunteers. And that's something you don't really learn in, when you're back in your home organization, you have your hierarchy behind you. Like when I was chief engineer for Tomahawk cruise missiles, I was pretty sure I could go to anybody on my program and say, hey, I need you to do this, and they're going to do it, because they got to do it. But when you're in an organization like a volunteer organization, like AIAA, or even if it's like a soccer coach or PTA or whatever it is, you learn that skill to lead by influence and motivation that you just don't get otherwise.
I just want to add in here. I'm Karen Copper. I chair the Career and Professional Development Committee for AIAA, and I'm also very involved in my local section. And while we're talking about the TAC and we're talking about things at the conference levels, as you move into your professional career, it was mentioned earlier about engaging your local section. Become an active member in your local section. Go to the events. Contact your local section chair and ask, how can I engage? On committees, on singular events, you can volunteer to help do some task, whether it's greeting people at the door or helping take the registrations. There are all kinds of tasks that need to be fulfilled at those section events. And what you'll gain from that interaction is, one, you're going to be meeting more people, so you're broadening your base. And as a new person, that's something you may possibly be going to a city where you know no one. So that's how you're going to develop friendships and meet more people. But it's also your opportunity to develop those skills that Laura was just talking about. And within your local section, you've got a safe environment to develop those skills that you will then take to your workplace. And many of the people at your local section are people in your working environment. So take advantage of that, and that can be a very powerful networking opportunity for you. Plus, the sections do need your engagement. We really do. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Karen. I do recognize about half the audience is new, and and I apologize. There was a misprint in the book. The conference, this part of the session actually started at 2 o'clock. So the last hour, you're going to have to go back and replay the tape on the AIAA website. We're recording it, and you'll be able to see the first hour. We spent essentially the first hour giving a brief summary of each one of our network's experiences. In the last half an hour or so, we've been taking questions from the audience on whatever's on your mind in terms of networking and that, and we don't mind if we have to repeat some of it, that's fine too. So the most important part is the questions that you guys generate as part of the AIAA environment. We've all been in the AIAA for many, many years and lots of senior level experience here, so we're willing to share that with anybody. But I do apologize that the book head is starting at 3 o'clock, which is when half the crowd showed up. So to get the first hour of it, you will have to go to the website here. Karen, it'll be up in a week or two, right?
It took several weeks for them to get the video edited and ready to post. So just keep an eye. It'll be at the AIAA.org website, and then it'll be under the education drop menu, and then under there the career center. And then that was this morning. That was from 11 till noon.
Yeah. So, and again, you can go see, replay the tape on that, in a couple of weeks, you can go see that as well. So good, so welcome to the additional, the crowd is 50 people now, which is good. It's twice as good as 25, I think, right? If I do the quick math on it. No, we won't start again, but I do welcome any other questions. We have essentially another 45 minutes, and I think the committee would be willing to stay at the appointed time. So are there any other questions about the mechanics of it, or what's on your mind as far as networking and its importance and how to do it at work, sort of thing, and or outside of work?
What do you want to know about networking?
So for the people, so I have a good example that I didn't cover earlier, but it sort of came to mind, and maybe it'll be a good way of sort of spurring some questions. So how many of you remember when the Space Shuttle Columbia crashed over Texas? Right, that was 12 years ago now, trying to think maybe. When that happened, I remember waking up on a Sunday morning and seeing it on television and watching it. I also remember when the Challenger went down, and Monday morning I went into work, and my boss came to me and said, hey, we got a request from our laboratory director, who got a request from the CEO of Lockheed Martin. Lockheed Martin is the operating contractor for Sandia, wanting to know how we can help, because the shuttle just went down, and obviously early on there was not a lot of information. Well, 2 days later I found myself and one of my bosses on a plane to Houston to go to NASA Johnson to see how we could help, with knowing very little information. And I remember us getting badged and going into a meeting, and every day they sort of had a morning meeting where all the the leads working the accident investigation were getting together, and people were going through data trying to find out what happened. And I remember me and my boss and a colleague walking into this meeting, and we got all these dirty stares of who are those people and why are they here, and why do we have to mess with them and all that kind of stuff. Well, in the back of the room, I saw a guy who I knew, and we were colleagues on the thermophysics technical committee together. And I went over to him and I said, hey, you know, we sort of got volunteered to come out. Can we help? You know, we've got, one of the things Sandia has done, because we have had a long experience in working sort of in the Missile Defense Agency, is we know how to deal with things that are damaged, either on purpose or otherwise. And this was an opportunity where the folks at NASA said, we don't do damage. That's not what we designed for. We design things to work and for people's lives to be safe and all this kind of stuff. And so I saw this guy in the back of the room who I'd known for probably 10 years because we were on the committee together. And, you know, he says, hey, what are you guys doing here? I said, we got volunteered. And he says, well, yeah, you know, we might be able to use your help. And so it was, and then we went back and I started asking, well, you know, who do you work with? And I seem to remember another guy I met on a committee who worked at NASA, Johnson. Is he here? Oh yeah, he's here and he's helping us with it. And we went back to their branch, and you know, I met their branch manager and all this kind of stuff, and we talked about the areas we had expertise in, and they were like, well, yeah, we could use your help. And instantly I saw this change in the way people were looking from this sort of distrustful, who are these guys, to, hey, we know you guys, at least through me, they knew me. And the other colleague I was with, who was worked in the parachute area for a long time, and he met a friend he knew, and suddenly there was this sort of, I don't want to say instant trust or credibility, but they were like, hey, these guys can help us. And I ended up spending like 7 weeks at NASA Johnson helping them and coordinating work back at Sandia, because we had people running computer models of the airflow and the impact of the foam on the wing, and it was actually one of the calculations that one of our guys did using this code called CTH, which is an impact modeling code, that actually showed that, yeah, if the foam hits the leading edge of the wing sort of just right with right orientation, it probably could cause damage and cause a hole. And so that was an example of, had I never gone to an AIAA conference or I'd never been involved in these committees, we would not have made that connection to help. And one of the results of it, at least for me, is that I ended up serving on a bunch of review committees for NASA, and they chartered this thing called the NASA Engineering and Safety Center, and I'm actually an external member for that group, and I have been for the last 12 years, because they wanted to get people not only within the agency but outside the agency to serve on review committees and things like that. And it all started, I can trace it all back to my AIAA roots. Anyway, I thought you might like to hear that example.
Thank you, Mason. Yeah. So, any other questions from the audience? We do have a microphone. We'll walk that up to you. So don't be bashful. This is, you know, there's $1 million of horsepower here in this room. You know, so,
I'm underpaid.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and give it a shot. I'm currently a bachelor's student right now, and I can fairly easily see how when I get to industry, how a network can be extremely beneficial to me. But when I'm a student right now, sometimes I have a problem with what can I really offer someone else who I'm trying to connect with. I don't have any experience in the industry like all of y'all have, obviously, and so when I'm trying to connect with someone, and I think that what they do is very interesting, what exactly are y'all's thoughts of how to best make myself useful instead of just going, hey, can I have an internship or a job when I get out of school?
So even though engineers aren't all that social, it turns out we still love to talk about what we do sometimes. So I think that's a great way to start. Is just, you know, ask people about what kind of work they're doing, and it's amazing how quickly you'll find ties to it. Or even if it's something you don't know anything about, you know, ask questions. That's how you start. Is just, you know, asking questions about what people are working on, because everybody who's here at this conference is working on really cool and interesting things. We do like to talk about it. And we can talk about the challenges we have. Sometimes that's the best way, is the challenges we have in our workplaces. And even though you're maybe not there yet because you're still a student, we can still share with you some of that. And it's just, and that's just how you start a relationship. And then you can talk about, how do I get an internship? What kinds do you have? What kind of work do you guys have? Where are you? Things like that. It actually starts pretty simply.
Yeah, go ahead, Larry.
I mentioned it, he mentioned it, don't be bashful, and if you are bashful, get over it, because, you do have to come up into people, and whether it's in your coursework, I mean, you're networking in every class you take. I mean, one of the things to remember is, at every step of your career, be the best you can, okay? Get the job done, in a technical excellent manner. Ask for additional help, or additional work if you want to take on more responsibilities, and keep expanding that network, and give back to the community. The community could be inside your school, could be going to middle schools or high schools or things like that while you're still an undergraduate or graduate student, because the people that are closest to your age probably relate to you better. And so, what you say to a middle schooler, probably resonates as much as, if not more, than if I came in and said the same thing to them.
So one of the things that I do at Sandia is I'm actually a recruiter, so I actually go on campus, and specifically I'm responsible for the schools that are in the state of North Carolina. So 2 months ago, I was there interviewing something like 15 people for internships and jobs and postdocs and things like that. And I think one of the things that I always try to do is, and I think that you should be able to do yourself, is sort of express what are the things that you'd like to do. Like, why did you get into aerospace engineering? Talk to people about what do their organizations do. Now, a lot of times I have somebody to come talk to me and say, hey, I'm really interested in propulsion, and I want to do that, and can I come work at Sandia to do that? And I'll have to tell them, well, we don't really do propulsion. That's not what we're good at. We make use of rockets, but we're not building them. But I will often tell them, tell me a little bit more about yourself. What are the things that you're sort of interested in? And when they tell me a little bit more, then I'll say, hey, you know what? I've got a buddy who works at Company X or Company Y, who I bet you they're looking for internships, and that's the kind of thing they'll do. And so I'll put you in touch with that person, right? Because if it's not something I can do, it's something that I know another organization might be able to do. So, whether you're at venues like this, or you're at section meetings, or you have speakers come in to talk to you at school, don't be shy about going up and asking them what they do, like Laura said, or ask them for their advice to where you might be able to find opportunities for yourself.
Thank you, Basil. So I might just add to that. I mean, you don't recognize it, but you're ahead of the game already, because you recognize you need a network and you don't have one. Okay, so that's kind of like, I got an error signal in the system, and I got to go do something about it. I mean, the term networking, I think, is largely I will call it a millennial term. I mean, it's only been 10 or 15-ish years sort of thing where people said, oh, I need a network of people that I know. And that, I mean, so I went through the first 25 years of my career not knowing that I needed a network, sort of thing. Okay, so I think you guys are at an advantage in recognizing that a network could be beneficial to you in the same way your technical degrees are beneficial to you. And the mere fact that you recognize, hey, I wish I had a network. I wish I knew 100 people in industry that are doing 17 different things, and you don't have that yet. But the recognition that you're striving for that is a good sign, I would say. I mean, you do have limited opportunity. You're still going to school. You got to concentrate on the classes. I get that. You don't have a job yet. Maybe you haven't had an intern responsibility yet, or an opportunity yet. But the recognition that you need that. You can start in little places like AIAA. You can start in LinkedIn. I'm not doing an advertisement for them per se, but there's a number of those kinds of things you can do, while you're still in school, and have a more, I'll say, limited availability of your network, sort of thing. Another question? Let's get to the microphone here so it gets recorded.
Okay, so kind of a follow-up to that, I'm also an undergraduate student. And I came in at 3, so I apologize if this was covered. But so I don't seem to have too much trouble coming up to someone, introducing myself, and if things go well, maybe exchange a business card. But I think the hard part, and maybe you could offer some tips, is how do you, once you make that first connection, I will probably remember each and every one of you because you're established, successful, and you make great mentors. On the other hand, no one's probably going to reach back out to me, I wouldn't think. So what are some tips for keeping that connection alive and, you know, just instead of just we met once, we talked, your business card's in my wallet, mine's in yours, and that's it, you know?
First thing you do is go back and either give them a phone call or their email address is probably on the card. So reach out to them and say, hey, thanks for talking with me, and start the relationship. I mean, very few people, if you're interested in having a relationship, will say, no, I don't have time. They'll make the time for it, but it does start with the mentee. You know, do you want to engage? And you know, and like I said earlier, and you weren't here, I'm sorry, but I'll repeat it. You know, a mentorship isn't a lifetime commitment either. You start them and you can stop them whenever they're not beneficial for either party. And so don't think that, okay, it could be a month, it could be 3 or 4 or 5 years, it could be a lifetime. You never know.
Well, one thing that really helps to get started is have a question or come to them with something. If you say, hey, I want some mentoring, it's kind of hard for me to get started. But if you say, hey, I just want, hey, how do I get in at Raytheon? Or, I'm finishing school, and what do you think about interview? If you come to me with a problem or a question or a decision you need to make, that actually gives me something that I can engage with you on, and it's actually a good way to get things started. And I actually get kind of frustrated when people just want to come by and just give me an update on how they're doing, because time is valuable, your time and my time. So, but when you come with a problem, we're happy to help. But it helps when you have a question or something that we can start with.
Yeah, and I will say, those of us on the panel, the other professionals that you will meet during the week here, whether they're people presenting or in part of the other sessions that you've all been going to, we were in the same position you all were in, right? Where we actually had to go up and ask somebody a question or get to meet them or whatever. And I was amazed to find out at how many people were so willing to talk to me. Right, and so I think that you're going to find the same thing out of us, because somebody did that for us, we're going to do it for somebody else. So, and I think Laura's right. Ask a question, or maybe you go to how many of you all have been going to the technical sessions? Okay, you're seeing technical talks, and they're going to be things that interest you. You might go up to one of the authors and say, it could be a professor, and say, hey, I was really interested in that work you're doing. I might be going to graduate school. I'm thinking between a job and graduate school, and the work you're doing is kind of the things I want to do. Could I get your card? Could I maybe send you an email and ask you some specific questions about the program you have or the facilities you have or where you get your funding and things like that, and maybe set up a time where we can chat, right? I guarantee you that most, if not all, AIAA professional members would be willing to sit down and have that conversation with you, whether it's via email or on the phone or face-to-face while you're here. But, I think that's really a great way to get started. Now, like you said, I may pass out 20 business cards and somebody sends me an email and I'm going to be thinking, okay, which person was that exactly? But then as we start having the conversation, I usually remember. And a lot of times, if I'm not the person to really go in depth on the questions, I'll refer you to somebody else.
Yeah, I'd just like to add a little bit is that everybody that's in AIAA has a different set of experiences. This morning we had another panel session this morning, and we found people that have virtually been consultants virtually their entire career, in a little company, single company, one-person company. I worked for Lockheed Martin for more than 35 years, so when people come to me and ask me my opinion, you're going to get the opinion of somebody that stayed in the same company, not on the same project and not in the same disciplines, but stayed in the same company for 35 years. So what's valuable to you could be a broad brush of understandings of, gee, I don't know if I want to work in a big company or a small company, or I want to be a consultant. So you will only get that insight into what you like. I mean, you might have an inkling. I think I might like to try this on my own. Well, this morning we found out that if you're out on your own from the very start, you're going to have sort of a sine wave of income, okay? And that sine wave might dip down to below zero, right? Because you don't have any work. But if you go to work for a big company, they tend to be a little more stodgy, a little more, level loaded sort of thing. Your pay won't be a largely differentiated from other people just like you sort of thing. That's the way big companies work. So in order for you to get a sense for your career of, which of the 27 different models, career models might make more sense to you, you do have to reach out to people and ask them questions like, what's the good side and what's the bad side of working for Lockheed for 35 years? What's the good side and bad side of starting your own company? Do you need 5 years of experience someplace and then go out on your own? Those are the kind of things that you can get from this community that you're in here. But it's only going to come, we're not going to go tell you, I won't broadcast to everybody, I really like Lockheed Martin, I've been here 35 years, every one of you should be there 35 years. That's not right. It doesn't meet your objective, doesn't meet your DNA, doesn't meet your culture. So we don't know what your culture is unless there's some engaging conversation. And most of it starts with, on your end, with how did you make decisions in your career to stay at the same place? How did you make decisions in your career to move around? The same sort of thing. So you need to engage the sort of the body of evidence that's here and here at the conference largely in order so you can get some insight into that. You won't get a silver bullet by coming to one conference and say, wow, I met 3 people that are consultants, I think I'll become a consultant. Yeah. So it'll take you a while to figure out what your DNA is. Okay, good. That was a great question. Another question from the back, please.
Hi, so I've been working at Lockheed Martin for about a year and a half.
Yay, for the home team.
Yeah.
Never heard of them.
That's why I'm sitting between you two.
So I would guess some of us in this room will eventually work on something classified at one point in our careers, or some of us may. I'm wondering if you think there's, like, working on classified work stunts your ability to network, because I've always wondered about this, because you can't talk as much about what you do. Are there, like, other ways to do networking when you're working on classified stuff?
Let me try that one. I spent about half my career on classified proprietary stuff and half of it on things we can talk about. So no, it doesn't stunt anything. I mean, you still have the ability within the company and within the program to talk about to different people from different disciplines, and you still also have that networking or that industry look, through AIAA, one of the other technical professions and things like that. And you can talk about, specifics of, the equations of motion or whatever it is that you can talk in, that doesn't tell anybody what program you're working on or what type of vehicle it is or whatever. So, I mean, I look back on the programs that I've worked in that were classified, and they were great. I mean, and you'll know some people don't like that environment, and you'll know pretty quickly whether or not that's something that you feel comfortable doing. To me it didn't make a difference. But yeah, don't think that you can't talk about things in general to other people. I mean,
I actually still spend a lot of my time in closed areas during the day. I think a lot of us probably do. And so there's a lot of things still to talk about. There's a lot of challenges of working in closed areas and working on classified programs. I mean, there's a wealth of lessons learned and best practices you can share about things like that. And it's really not unlike, because a lot of stuff we work on is also competition sensitive too. So, I'm not going to necessarily share all the stuff I'm doing back in my company on certain, projects that we're working on, but I can still talk about a lot of other things around that. So there's still plenty of opportunity.
I think, the place where because at Sandia we do a lot of national security related stuff and it's classified, and while I may not be able to talk about specific programs, like Larry was saying, I could talk about the techniques we use, I could talk about the different ways we might be testing things in our wind tunnels, talk about the different computational fluid dynamics or aero codes we use and how we apply them and things like that. And, more often than not, if you know, that might be an opportunity if we want to go deeper, that maybe you come out and pay a visit to Sandia and we spend a day talking about, assuming we have the same clearance levels, and talking about those things. And a lot of times that is how collaborations have been developed. I mean, a good example of probably 2 years ago, some folks at Laura's company who are working in the hypersonics area came to Sandia to talk to us about some of the experiences we had in some hypersonic flight programs. And while there were certain things we could talk to them about and other things we couldn't, we were at least able to have that dialogue of what we did and how we might be able to help them. Working on classified can be tough because it's sort of an extra level of rigor that you have to deal with. You have to be very careful. You have to make sure that you're treating information properly. But some of the funnest programs I've worked on have been at the classified level, and some have not. So I think it's just a mix, right? Yeah. Yeah, you get, and you know, Karen's saying you get training on how to communicate, how to deal with the information, how to work with it, and things like that before you get too far into it.
So I think the message is don't shun the classified work and think that it's going to either stunt your career or stunt your networking or anything. That's just not it's not accurate based on our experience here. Good question. Another question, please.
Let me see if I can get some response out of everyone. We shared what got us into aerospace was kind of the space race back in a few years ago. What was the things that your generation, you know, resonated with that said, hey, I want to get into aerospace engineering?
Let us get you the microphone.
Hi. So, kind of back on the networking, we come to conferences like this where there are a lot of people to meet. And to put it bluntly, for both as a recruiter and as a consultant, there are kind of some specific things I'm looking for. And so specifically a company that only hires a certain major, for instance, or only hires a certain degree level. And obviously networking, there's always value in talking to lots of different people, but I find that I often come and I'm talking to someone for, you know, half an hour, 40 minutes, and there were 10 other people, and there might have been 2 or 3 people that kind of were more in line with what I was looking for. Do you guys have any advice on how to kind of meet as many people as possible and sort of find the people where then you want to follow up with them later because, hey, your skill set was something that's exactly what I was looking for, without being rude and discounting people that may not be what you're looking for, but also you don't have 30 minutes to talk to them?
So I can't remember, Karen, do they have one of those speed mentoring or speed networking events later today?
Yes.
So if you all get a chance to go to that, that's really, really great, because I think you get something like 4 minutes to meet with a bunch of people in the room, and then you go to the next table and you can ask them questions, or they can tell you something about what's important to them. Is, you know, what I usually tell people a lot of times is, when I go to conferences, I tell my staff and the people I work with, I don't want to see you during the week, okay? Because I can see you back at home and back at work. And so I'd rather not see a group of people who know each other all congregating at a reception talking to each other, and I'll purposefully just go find a group of students or go find a group of young professionals at a reception and just sort of throw myself in there and say, hey, I'm Basil, I'm from Sandia, where are you guys from? Tell me about yourself, and spend a few minutes there, and then I'll go find another group. But you know, one of the things that I would be prepared for is, especially if someone's asking you questions, is, everybody ever heard of an elevator speech? Right? It's the 1 minute you get to talk to somebody. Is if somebody asks you, tell me about yourself and what you're interested in, have that 1 minute elevator speech prepared so you can tell people. But you just have to sort of jump in and do it. But this speed networking thing is actually really cool if you all get a chance to participate.
Good. Another question?
Hi, So I'm a grad student, and I know that the network, well, the very limited network I've cultivated so far is kind of particularly like related to my research. But I know that looking for future employment, I'm kind of looking at something not incredibly different, but kind of something that's outside the network that I have right now. And I know that I've kind of found it hard to relate to people who are doing that kind of direction just because I don't have my experience myself. So I was wondering if you had advice on how to kind of make that leap or that jump at a conference where maybe you don't have as much in common, just right off the bat.
So one thing I started doing when I was first in my profession early, I'd go to all the sessions that were like related to the work I was doing. This kind of gets to Bob's point earlier. After a while, I realized I actually either know a lot about that stuff already, or I just wanted something different. So I actually just started going through the program, looking for stuff that was just interesting, even if it didn't have anything to do with what I was working on or what I was involved in, just what was interesting to me. Or same thing with visiting a technical committee that's having a meeting that may not be related to the work I'm doing. And I tell you, that opened up a whole world for me about, stuff I could pick up, and it's unbelievable the connections I made from, a paper that I went to just by chance because it sounded kind of interesting, turns out was related to something else I was doing, or, the connections just sort of come out of their own, and you can't kind of predict how they're going to go. So just kind of open yourself up to different opportunities and go see different things than you would have before. I think Bob's advice was really good in that area, and you'll develop different contacts and different contexts, and you'll come back at your own work and you'll look at it differently and maybe put you on a new thread of investigation or research because of what you saw at a conference.
Probably one of the best assets that your advisors can be is helping you get in contact with people. So let's pull the string a little bit. Tell me the area you're working in.
So right now I'm working in dynamic stability for kind of blunt body entry vehicles. And I'm
Okay.
looking to get involved with more kind of aerodynamics in commercial aviation.
Okay. So what you might want to do is, like Laura says, maybe you go to a session and you see somebody giving a paper that's in an interest area and you can go talk to them. Ask your advisor. I mean, your advisors know a lot of people, right? Because they've either worked together on particular programs, they've gone and written proposals to solicit money. Is talk to them and say, hey, this is what I'm really interested in doing. Can you give me the names of a few people that you've met during your time in AIAA and put me in touch with them? I'll tell you, a lot of the people that I hire are people or students that I get through the network of professors or other professionals that that I've met. I mean, to get a job at Sandia, you have to go to the website and apply for a specific job. But I actually usually develop a one-page summary of the job posting I'm looking at, and I shotgun it out to about 100 people and say, hey, we're looking for somebody with this kind of expertise. Could you, pass it to interested students or people you might think interested? And more often than not, that's the way that I found people. So it's sort of through that network. So a lot of people do that, and they email the professors. So your professors have those contacts as well. So if you don't find something here, even when you get back at school, say, hey, now that I'm looking for a job, this is what I want to do. Can you help me get in touch with people?
Or there's several technical committees that could be related. Go through the schedule of technical committees that are meeting this week, and if any of them kind of look close to what you might be interested in, just go listen in. They're open meetings and introduce yourself to a couple people.
Yeah, so I mean, in your case, the Applied Aerodynamics Technical Committee, the Atmospheric Flight Mechanics.
Yeah. Aircraft design. Yeah.
Aircraft design, some of
Yeah.
those might be ones that you want to.
And the point is, when you go to that, it's not a homogeneous crowd in there. There'll be people that are, that are wizards in it, and there'll be people that have a passing interest. So, and everything between. So that's the part of the networking that you aren't going to be able to do. You sort of what I call a laser beam of point out somebody in the room that thinks just like you. It's just not how the networking thing works. It works sort of surreptitiously, and it works. People that that you sort of know, and they know somebody else, and they know somebody else, and sometimes this stuff can be 3 and 4 levels deep, and so it's very hard to go to a conference like this and walk into a room. This room's got 50 people in it right now. There's probably somebody in this room that also is interested in the same sort of thing you're in, and maybe not in a laser beam sense, but in the general area. And your challenge is to go find them, right? So the conference that has the the sessions that have people that are, generally in that sphere of influence are the most likely sort of target-rich environment thing where you can go. But you won't find everybody in that room that's really interested in the same stuff you are, because a lot of them are doing the same thing you're doing. They're all on a fishing trip. They go to this fishing hole, they go to that fishing hole, they go to another fishing hole, sort of thing.
Did I hear you say that you were interested in commercial aircraft? Or?
Yep, that's
okay.
correct.
Is there a reason for that interest? Company you want to work for, the location that you might want to, move to, or?
Well, I know for me that I guess I was originally interested in space kind of growing up, but a lot of my classes and aircraft design especially kind of really, it was a senior project that kind of completely switched my focus. But I know that Boeing is definitely a company that I've always kind of really idolized, and just they make beautiful planes. And
You're right.
yeah, I mean, not to kind of, I don't know, tout too much on that, but I, as a young person, I'm flexible with moving. I feel like there's a lot of the country to see, so.
Sure. And we touched on it a little bit, but I mean, all the different disciplines that make up an aerospace vehicle are very, very much interrelated. So the aerodynamic forces and moments in the guidance and control and, and the flight software and all that kind of stuff, they're all interrelated. You probably got a pretty good feel for that. And I think I heard you say design project. Was that through AIAA?
Yeah, well, no, it was my senior capstone for my
Okay,
undergraduate.
all right.
Yeah.
So, that those are great, they give you that teamwork, and no engineer, there's no mad scientists out there that are, doing everything on their own, so it is a teamwork, and so, but give me some contact information, and maybe we can talk a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean,
We have 4 seasons, all in one day.
I've heard.
one of the things that you can do if you're at the sessions and you see a person who gave a paper and you don't necessarily have access to the paper, I've had people come up to me after I've given a talk and say, hey, any chance I could get a copy of your paper? Here's my card. Could you email me a PDF, or can I email you? And that's the biggest form of flattery when you ask somebody for something they've done, and that's led to opportunities for people because they showed an interest in what they were doing.
It was brought up about the speed networking. That event actually begins at 4:45, so just momentarily, and it will be in the Seaport H room.
Good.
Great follow-up to this, and that's actually why we ended it the 15:45, so they could go to their event as well. Well, we thank you all for coming, and those who attended earlier sessions, thank you for your support. If you have ideas or topics for next year's workshop, please drop an email to myself or to Megan Scheit, who is our staff liaison support for our committee, and hope to see you next year. Thank you for the committee.
Yeah, thank you to the committee and the panel that talked to us.
It's a pleasure.